and most welcome to check C 1189. Yes, that's correct. And our today, as promised earlier, speak a little bit about Lucio Diego Rapoport. I will end with a summary, last 15 minutes or so. See what my understanding amounts to. Say that we are in Trädgårdsföreningen, in the middle of Gothenburg. It's a very lovely day. Seems to be the cleaning up day after the weekend. It's Monday. I'm standing here in the sun and it's exceptionally warm. It's going to be 15-16 degrees. As we are presently at the 3rd of October, that this is Indian summer in Sweden, without a doubt. Potentially you can wear shorts. So what I'm going to read is an article, at least on the net, called The Genomic Topologies, Harmonics and Evolution. Part 1, Morphomechanics, Space and Time in Biology and Physics, Cognition, Non-linearity and the Structure of Uncertainty. And I have to say also this goes into the line with quantum mechanics as perceived by Chris Evans. I think as to some of you I send the link. He's not going to be into in this lecture, but I still will provide something in the description so you can look him up and check him out. Extraordinary nice tea. Ginger. Soothing for the throat. Nice if you take it. Cough pill. Abstract can be a good start. In the first parts of series of articles we discuss the torsion geometry of biology, physics, cognition and perception. We discuss the relations with the non-linear morphomechanics of organisms and the integration of the body's chiralities. We present the connections with the topology of neural networks as heterarchies and with multi-loci logics as basis for the hyperclaim of logophysics in genomics, system theory and cognition. We discuss the link to the relational paradigm for biology, system theory and physics. We introduce the link to the relational paradigm for biology, systems theory and physics. We introduce the relations of torsion with self-reference as a generating principle and as a proto-semiotic agency. We present the relations of heterarchies to cognition and system theory. We discuss the relation between chaotic dynamics, blown-up systems, the nonlinear logophysics of the Klein bottle, and the paradoxical structure of real numbers. In particular, we elaborate on the breakdown of the continuum hypothesis, the origin of singularities, particularly with respect to general relativity, and the nonlinear elasticity of biological development. We discuss the relation of computational error and the Klein bottle logophysics. We present the hierarchical logophysics and the constitution of the self as a model and of a sense of reality as a primary epistemic state, further promoted to a dual ontology, which we discuss in terms of the foundations of mathematics in set theory and topoi. And the measurement problem in quantum mechanics. We introduce a fundamental inside-outside image scheme in cognitive semantics and discuss its pervasive role in cognition and the framing of the sciences, and give several examples of this. We introduce logical systems as formalizations of ontologies, their role in cognition, the neurosciences, cybernetics, and biocomputation, and discuss their setting in terms of positional hyper-Klein bottle logics and classical dual logic as a particular case. We develop a phenomenological approach to unified science. We discuss the time operator. We discuss the relations of the present logophysics to Rosen's proposals of an approach to system theories based on the calculus of differential forms, and with regards to the topological approach to theoretical physics and chemical topology. We discussed the relation between the present logophysics and Spencer Brown's laws of form. Introduction: Genomic matrices, topology, nor orientable surfaces, the torsion geometry of nature, semiosis, cognition, and hierarchies. Introducing a special issue on the mathematics of genomics. Sergei Petukov offers a reflection on the subject, quoting the work of I. Stewart. The biological meaning of genetic informatics is reflected in the brief statement: life is a partnership between genes and mathematics. But what kind of mathematics has relationship with the genetic code? And what kind of mathematics is behind genetic phenomenology? This question is one of the main challenges in the exact natural sciences today. The author proceeds to comment on the relations between the problem of noise immunity for the transmission of genetic information, which compromise as well the coordination of all subsystems which make up an organism as an integrated being operating through cyclical processes. As well as the problem of self-reproduction of both the genetic system and organisms. These are problems for mathematics to deal with. In relation with the problem of noise-immune transmissions of information, these problems have been solved technologically. They resort to the implementation of the theory of Rademacher and Hadamard matrices, which allow for such a feat as the transmission and reconstruction of digital photographs of planets and the solar system itself, taken by several devices. Yet, while Hadamard matrices play a role in the theory and practices of coding information immune to noise, in the case of 2x2 Hadamard matrix, they are nothing but the matrix representation of a two-dimensional surface, the Klein bottle. This surface, globally considered, has one single side. Locally considered, it seems to have two sides. This surface is a non-orientable, which means that a normal vector, i.e. a perpendicular vector to the surface, is unique. This stands in distinction with orientable surfaces, which have two different sides, and thus two different normal vectors exist, one for each side. The Klein bottle surface has no global inside nor outside, but as local states which are connected and intertransformed rather than separated. This connection and intertransformation of local outside and local inside is produced by the self-penetration of this surface. Thus, this surface, rather than being contained in ambient three-dimensional space, it is defined and produced by its self-containment due to the self-penetration. And like genomes, the Klein bottle is self-referential. As for the mathematics advocated by Petukhov, they reveal algebraic codings of genomes using structures which are also common to quantum mechanics and to several areas of physics, which may appear in first consideration to be unrelated to the genomics. The principle derived from this mathematics, which is also basic to physics and chemistry, is that of symmetries, which is also basic to biological morphologies. It is impossible to conceive of biochemistry without considering issues of enantiomerism as early discovered by Pasteur. And enantiomerism is all about symmetry and its disruption. Chirality, which is handedness, plays a crucial role to biochemistry and life, and already appears in the double helix model of DNA, which in principle may have any of the two chiralities. Enantiomerism is essentially related to the non-orientable Möbius strip surface, which we can think of as a surface contained on a line which also has no outside nor inside. Actually, two collated enantiomeric Möbius strips generate a Klein bottle. As it turns out to be the case, the algebraic structures of genomes revealed by Petukhov have a more basic root in the algebraic coding of the Klein bottle surface as a non-dual logic which admits a binary representation, which is the cornerstone of informatics and particularly of genomes. This coding leads to reveal a fractal-like topology of genomes as hyperklein bottles, family of Klein bottles structured as a heterarchy, of which we shall present numerical evidence of it in the human genome. Symmetries in genomes appear in many forms, already related to their chirality. Also, the pervasive existence of palindromic sequences as ordered structures interspersed in what is conceived to be an extremely complex genomic structure. Whose fundamental changes are considered to be random. But randomness is a word for ignorance. Ontologically, randomness seems not to exist, at least not independently of symmetry, as related to non-orientability. This follows from 60 years of continuous experiments of great diversity, based in what is usually conceived as random phenomena that has shown the existence of a universal cosmological factor influencing the fine structure of supposedly random fluctuations. Indeed, there are histograms developed as time series appear to have the form of palindromes, appearing as time cycles. This is the Schnoll effect, attributed to cosmological factors. Despite their complexity, these data reveal a remarkable topological symmetry, actually a family of shapes which can be conceived as Möbius strips and iterated Klein-Bottle and hyper-Klein-Bottles, as we shall see. In fact, this shape of data will be the focus of our attention In fact, this shape of data will be the focus of our attention in bioinformatics and else. It is already known that highly dimensional data such as visual input does reduce to two-dimensional shapes, solving thus the curse of hyperdimensionality. Where this is ascribed to the brain, we shall see that this phenomenal reduction and shaping of data takes place already in genomes and still appears as basic to phenomenology through the body as a whole. Yet the same conception, although through different algorithms, has been applied in the field of comparative genomics to pools of genes to identify common patterns and to search for the elusive tree of life. This points out to the existence of meta-patterns which can be used to make predictions, and in particular in bioinformatics actually a metagenomic pattern. As we shall see later, these points out to a generic form of checksum in nature related to non-orientability as a process by which the symmetry is produced and conserved through the dynamics of structures such as genomes. As it will turn out to be the case of genomes as operated through transposons and palindromes, and as we said, related to the cosmological factors in the case of the most diverse, seemingly random experiments. It also points out to a form of algorithmic causality which is more basic than all forms of causality, and which underlies both genomic symmetry as well as the palindromic symmetries unveiled by Schnoll. Petukhov puts the case as follows. Biological organisms belong to a category of very complex natural systems which correspond to a huge number of biological species with inherited properties. But surprisingly, molecular genetics has discovered that all organisms are identical to each other by their basic molecular genetic structures. Due to this revolutionary discovery, a great unification of all biological organisms has happened in the science. The information genetic line of investigations has become one of the most prospective lines, not only in biology, but also in the science as a whole. The basic system of genetic coding has become strikingly simple. Its simplicity and orderliness presented challenges to specialists from many scientific fields. Bioinformatics considers each biological organism as an ensemble of information systems which are interrelated to each other. The genetic coding system is the basic one. All other biological systems must be correlated to this system to be transmitted to the next generations of organisms. Petukhov. Yet there is one fundamental area of mathematics which embodies uniquely in its simplicity these complex structures. This area is topology, etymologically the study of loci. It is the mathematical study of shapes, yet essentially conceived qualitatively as an equivalent under continuous deformations rather than analytically nor quantitatively, the latter being at large the predominating conception and operation of mathematics. Topology appears to be especially adequate to explain biological systems. Already the eminent anatomist and naturalist John Bell Pettigrew influenced the founder of the mathematical studies in biology. Darcy W. Thomson, both being unaware of topology as a mathematical discipline, intuited its fundamental role in biological systems as viewed from the experience of glass-blowing surfaces and the continuous deformation. i.e., topological transformations which are continuous as well as their inverse of organic shapes. Indeed, Thomson viewed allometric transformations of body plans of organisms as a basis for the appearance of species in terms of previous ones. actually following Goethe's Urform, the archetypal plant shape, usually attributed to evolution. William Hiss, the anatomist and physiologist considered to be the father of human embryology, for introducing the 3 germ layers, practiced a series of topological experiments with rubber and wax tubes, aiming to understand morphogenesis. Thus, Hiss was able through mechanical deformations to reproduce the shape of the gut, brain, and other organs. This was crucial to the later appearance of developmental mechanics as the mechanics of morphogenesis, originally as independent of genes. The current investigations of biological development already point out that both superficial observation of the developmental processes and their refined analysis up to the molecular level shows that practically all of them are associated with regular and repeatable deformations of material units, ranging roughly from cell collectives to single molecules. What is called morphogenesis is actually a succession of such deformations observed at the cellular level and supracellular levels. It is but natural to extend this same term to the lower structural levels as well. Excuse me. Accounting for this sequence of topological transformations encompassing several scales, morphomechanics came to the fore as an analytical theory of biological development, in which the nonlinear character of the mathematical models with ensuing non-linear shapes of development is crucial. In fact, in terms of non-linear elasticity evolutions, morphomechanics develops vortical solutions with singularities, which we shall discuss further, so that in these terms, bodies upon development must be both continuous and discontinuous. which is notoriously the case. However, morphomechanics is based on a dualistic assumption, a distinction between forces inside and outside relative to the biological tissue, or active and passive forces respectively, operating through a hierarchy. Thus, morphomechanics is usually conceived in terms of an image schema, which categorizes in terms of an inside-outside divide. Yet, and most remarkably, this categorization is somewhat surmounted along its presentation. The steps of morphogenetical processes are considered to be interpretable as a collective of processes mandated by the genes deep within the cells. As activation of a gene component to a structure which should be formed at the given moment and in the given place, and each step of evolution should be regarded as a recognition or emergence of a gene which is competent to a new structure never formed before. Thus, development and genomes cooperate, giving meaning to particular locations through timing. And this is the interior's workings. This inside-outside dualistic categorization assumed for morphomechanics is also purported to be the case of genomes, particularly upon ignoring epigenetic factors and in the geometrical model of DNA itself. Furthermore, the non-uniqueness of genomics in determining and operating biological functioning is related to its surmountal in terms of mutually interpenetrating and self-penetrating hierarchies, which does transcend this categorical divide, as we shall elaborate below. Following the pioneering work of A.G. Gurwitch on the so-called mitogenetic radiation, cell division is considered to follow the integration of exterior factors. As signal and the interior state of the cell. As it will turn out to be the case, DNA itself is dynamically patterned in such a way as to produce electromagnetic fields with non-orientable topology, which is logophysically homologous to that of genomes, and further related to harmonies. Furthermore, these non-orientable surfaces topologies surmount the inside-outside divide. Studies of self-reference in cognition, artificial intelligence, and computer science, which stem from and unfold in terms of this dual categorization, claim that the inside-outside divide operates as a belief system which dominates and structures our cognition, actually our dualistic organization of it. Thus, it is claimed that it would be of great interest to study the structure of these belief systems in detail, their relationship with the deep structures of language. To a certain extent, this quest is self-referential. Since our tools for studying things are largely based on the concepts of internal and external reality. But self-reference is not necessarily a problem. It can be a part of a solution. It is hard to imagine a research program of greater importance or interest than this one. Indeed, self-reference as embodied in the Klein bottle is an inevitable element of a solution, since this categorization is a reduction of the non-dual Klein bottle logic. Upon neglecting its reentrance by self-penetration, this surface embodies a surmount of this divide, since it is self-contained, thus providing a non-dual ontology for a unified science, yet conceived phenomenologically, which is largely missing in its current developments, if not claimed to deter from ontology of classical logic. More contemporarily, topology appears at the very basis of the theory of relational biology developed by Nicholas Rashevsky. He was the father of mathematical biophysics, and in particular of the notion of neural networks, later pursued by his students Anatole Rapoport, Robert Rosen, and Walter Pitts, among others. Rashevsky recovered Goethe's notion of the primeval form, urform, and further extended Thomson's conception of shapes arising from more elementary ones. The more complicated manifold processes of higher order organisms are related to the processes of simpler organisms. Thus, Rashevsky proposed a principle whereby if the relations between various biological functions of an organism are represented geometrically in an appropriate topological space or by an appropriate topological complex, then the spaces or the complex representing different organisms must be obtainable by a proper transformation from one or very few primordial spaces or complexes. Furthermore, Rashevsky proposed a distinction between physics and biology, whereby while physical phenomena are the manifestations of the metric properties of the four-dimensional universe, biological phenomena may perhaps reflect some local topological properties of that universe. Thus, Rashevsky suggested a differentiation for modeling nature, geometry as metrics for a quantitative model of physics, with topology to model biology qualitatively. The case to be expounded here is that there is a geometry and related topology common to both physics and biology, as well as to chemistry, perception, and cognition, associated to the non-orientability of torsion geometries and number systems, rather than metric geometries and topology as separate formalizations, the former for physics, the latter for biology. They are further related to non-dual logic as the ontological and epistemological basis for a logophysics of nature. Physics, chemistry, biology, and the unlinked sciences being nothing but particular cases. The dismissal of pursuing a geometrical approach restricted to metrics was suggested for physics by the eminent mathematical physicist E.T. Whittaker, who puts it thus: since the notion of metric is a complicated one, which requires measurements with clocks and scales, generally with rigid bodies, which themselves are systems of great complexity, it seems undesirable to take metric as a fundamental, particularly for phenomena which are simpler and actually independent of it. Metrics, that is the articulation of distance, and its algebraic abstraction is merely descriptive and numerical rather than qualitative. It does away with processes and interactions as primary. Furthermore, geometry is based on metrics are ontologically based on dualism. Yeah, that might be the case. The distance of two objects as each exterior to the other, as we shall discuss below further. Why, it's rather sharp, Rapoport. However, the light cone as defined by the zero distance locus of the Minkowski metric already embodies a non-dual ontology and actually gives the setting for the study of interactions and distinctions in relation to this locus. Thus, metrics can hardly serve as a basic principle for relational biology, nor for physics, not in terms of a non-dual ontology for that matter. Neither a metric nor curvature are primal, as we shall see next. The torsion geometry of physics, biology and cognition, time operator, morphomechanics, and the relational paradigm and topology. It is a subject of current debate whether biology is reducible to physics, either in the framework of the Newtonian paradigm, as examined by Rosen, or of quantum physics, just alike molecular biology, deemed biology as reducible to chemistry. Yet, what has been disconsidered is the possibility that biology, physics, chemistry, cognition and perception may be all integrated non-reductively as logophysics based on trans-dual logics, as we shall expound in the present article following previous contributions. Thus, for a start in this article, we shall introduce torsion geometry, since it is the relevant for conceptualization of the forthcoming theory vis-à-vis the modelization of biology in terms of geometry and topology, which in this article we shall keep in quite elementary terms. Yet, these issues are basic to physics, chemistry and cognition, as we shall see. In distinction with the metric geometry of general relativity, torsion geometry is primal with respect to curvature, the latter being a derivative, the so-called covariant differential of the former, or in simpler terms, a derivative of the torsion field. While torsion involves first-order partial derivatives and thus is related to gradient fields as the differences that arise from differences in the Batesian sense and as such operate as information fields, curvature involves second-order partial derivatives. Thus, curvature is not primal, but derived from torsion. For example, electromagnetism, where the trace torsion differential, one form, stands for the electromagnetic potential, and the differential of this as a curvature gives the electromagnetic field itself, which actually can be null, though in the highly non-trivial case, such as the Aharonov-Bohm potential. Or still in fluid dynamics, where the velocity field and the torsion field are identified. While the differential of the former is the vorticity field as associated curvature. This is embodied by the so-called Bianchi equations in differential geometry, which set out structural relations for space-time frames. That is, observer, torsion and curvature. The Bianchi equations may actually provide for the structural equations for the geometry of the fundamental interactions without recurring to an extraneous stress energy tensor as a non-geometrical matter source, and thus all the relevant information of a self-sufficient theory. A geometrical theory of space-time structures and processes, be that of physics or biology, cannot have other source than geometry. Otherwise, inconsistency is the case. However, we may need to reveal the geometry of genomics to do so, so it actually will turn out to be the case. Already in biological morphogenesis vortices, the elementary torsional motions and other deceptive structures are deemed to be important to development. They are acknowledged as preparatory at supramolecular and cellular levels with respect to the morphomechanics of development, which is described by curvature. Hence, it is torsion which ontologically precedes curvature in morphogenesis at this integrated levels of organization. On the other hand, tissue differentiation is associated to a tensegrity cellular structure which embodies a torsion geometry. The shearing motions in morphomechanics produce curvature from folding and are thus related to torsion rather than curvature. The latter, we recall, was induced by Einstein as an imaginal symbolical representation of matter, which curves the otherwise flat matter devoided space-time. These shearing motions further create rotational motions, which are the basis for morphogenesis, not only restricted to morphomechanics. Indeed, viscous fluids, whether magnetized, as in the case of plasmas, or electric chargeless or not, produce shear. And in doing this, they produce vortical motions crucial to turbulence, which is considered a signature of complexity in fluids. In account that the latter are the most pervasive state of matter, we see that torsion geometry indeed universal at the material level. Torsion geometries are equivalent to Brownian motions, which already the biologist Brown identified as the motions of life. Hence, the Brownian motions in the scale of biological systems can be considered to be small-scale vortical structures, which are considered to be random, but at the physical level they encompass the microscale from quantum vortical fluctuations to cosmological structures of charged plasmas and diffusing galaxies. These quantum vortices appear to be the case of ordered water domains, since they have a Möbius strip topology, as we shall see, which are believed to be crucial to organisms' integration and coherence. They are further suggested to be the basis for the communication of the body operating as an harmonic system. Remarkably, morphomechanics acknowledges non-linearity, which has vortices for its source, as crucial to the feedback processes of self-organization, the so-called circular causality of parametric regulation, i.e. by relatively slow and spatially smooth evolution. Embryonic development is ruled by non-linear equations, which in turn is crucial to the reliability of this kind of dynamical regulation. It is non-linearity which ensures precise results despite the non-precise input. It further provides for the appearance of novelty and to the reduction of symmetries concomitant with the increase of complexity as development advances. Still, it is non-linearity which allows for the transition from determinism to self-organization. We shall later discuss these issues in terms of the divergent blown-up solutions of nonlinear evolutions, their chaotic attractors, and the non-dual logophysics that produces them. There is still another example that captures the primal importance of torsion, namely its relation with symmetries. Actually, the so-called Lie groups of symmetries. Indeed, for non-commutative commutative Lie groups, there is a canonical invariant geometrical structure which has non-null torsion and null curvature. Let's check it's still recording. Indeed, for the non-commutative Lie groups, there is a canonical invariant geometrical structure which has non-null torsion and null curvature. In this structure, both the curvature and the metric are expressed in terms of the torsion rather than being primal. However, the Lie groups also possess a geometry which has null torsion and non-null curvature defined in terms of their geodesics. So non-commutative Lie group symmetries elicit a superposition of structure in terms of their torsion and the derived curvature. A geometry as elementary as the two-sphere is one such example. A knowledge which allowed the great Portuguese sailors to navigate the globe. This property of a duplicitous structure will later appear in chemical configurations, as certain molecules may have configurations which can be both orientable and non-orientable. In the former structure with zero curvature and null torsion, the latter defines up to a minus sign the positional relations which characterize the symmetry itself, the so-called structural coefficients of the symmetry appearing in the expansion of the commutator of two infinitesimal symmetries in terms of all of them. These symmetries are fundamental to physics, chemistry and biology, and to the active construal of visual perception as a gestaltic integration. Belousov's account of morphomechanics also highlights the importance of symmetries and shape, which is not restricted to, quote from Belousov, the input but also output in a feedback cycle. In biology, they appear in the so-called Pasteur-Curie principle, which deals with the dialectical relation between symmetry and asymmetry. That is broken symmetry, usually by localization as a form of contextualization pervasive even to physics, end of quote. As well known, this principle followed the discovery of molecular enantiomorphism and the observed symmetry breaking with the preference of one particular chirality, which appears to be crucial relation to life. Succinctly expressed, this principle claims that both symmetries and dissymmetries are causally conserved, and in a causal relation there can be no more symmetry in the effect than those already present in the cause. Lima de Faria developed the theory of evolution in terms of self-organization, puts it thus: symmetry creates form, the asymmetry creates the phenomenon. This dialectics of symmetry and asymmetry, which, cursorily expressed, is that of shape and phenomenon, was called synsymmetry. It is crucial to molecular recognition as in the ligand-receptor binding. The importance of this cannot be overstressed in regards to biological evolution. Indeed, molecular recognition provides a profound inertia to evolutionary innovation because it demands conservation of forms of proteins and hence of encoding genes. This dialectics is the case of both DNA and RNA, particularly with respect to the symmetry given by the palindromic secondary structures of single-stranded RNA, to be unveiled in this article as generated by the Klein-Bottle logic. They are responsible for the stability and molecular recognition features of RNA molecules. Molecule recognition operates differently to the dual logic of symmetry usually attributed to this class of phenomenon. The keyhole mechanism. The latter cannot account for the cognitive tasks performed by biological systems, particularly those attributed to meaning-making. Yet the metaform of the synsymmetry dialectics has been identified as the Klein-Bottle. We retake Rashevsky's pledge for topology in biology. Indeed, observing the two topological identifications that create the Klein-Bottle, we learn that it embodies a fusion of asymmetry and symmetry, respectively relative to them, in distinction with a real projective line for which both opposite sides are identified with the same direction. Thus, the real projective line embodies only cross symmetry, while for the Möbius strip, partial cross symmetry is the case as the seemingly two sides of it merge continuously into a single side with a single boundary that contains in a process of dimensional creation, since this surface exists embedded in Euclidean 3D space in terms of which appears as if contained in it. The present ontology is related to the creative operations of the sin-symmetry dialectics, be that of meanings, shapes, space, and time, rather than an ontology for static identities and a static being. Morphomechanics has upholded the Pasteur-Curie principle for understanding development, to claim that non-linearity cooperates with it. Also in the setting of a theory of evolution based on self-organization, this dialectics has been identified as the very principle for evolution, no less because the symmetries found to be valid in physics carry on to chemistry and to biological shapes. Thus, torsion as associated to symmetry as well as sin-symmetry is crucial to circular causality, which in turn is also the case of heterarchies, albeit notably complexified. Both issues to be discussed below. In the setting of metric theories of space-time, a dualistic conception places a categorization of physical symmetries into interior and exterior symmetries. This requires invoking additional degrees of freedom as extra dimension to account for the interior symmetries, to be later invoked as compactification of them to account for the impossibility of attaining physical evidence of them. However, in the case of torsion geometry, this categorical divide of symmetries is surmounted. Physical symmetry and its localized form of fields and particles is associated to torsion as it manifests as space-time structure. In morphomechanics, the development of the embryo is related to the changes of symmetries, decreasing sequentiality in symmetry order with development, but for some case in which the reverse appears to be the case. They are also defined as symmetry breaks starting with the symmetry of the sphere. The same dissociation between external and internal symmetries claimed in physics for point-line particles and their fields, but now relative to the organism's boundary or that of tissue, has been purported to be the case of development of embryos. In this setting, exterior agencies operate producing symmetry breaking. However, this interior-exterior categorical divide has found to be wanting. Still, the dynamical changes in symmetries which are embodied by the developing embryo actually show that the succession of changes is related to topological operations. As noted by Belousov, These occur as liquid crystals, which are examples of torsion geometry with a Mobius strip topology, producing vortical instabilities through folding. Hence, the fundamental operations of embryological development are 1. The folding of tissues, 2. The densification, convergence of the number of cells in a particular loci, 3. The shearing motions of layers of cells with the ensuing breakage of continuity as intercalation, and 4. The creation of singularity by self-penetration, the latter two being the so-called Volterra operations of the geometrical torsion theory of crystal dislocations to be discussed below. These operations cannot be primarily associated with metrics. Metrics do not represent relatedness, but a measure of the distance of a mere exteriority of objects, as if passively and neutrally contained in space and time, which exist per se and as such unaccountable process-wise. This self-penetration with the creation of a singularity is the case of the blastopore invagination. However, this invagination does not follow the interior-exterior divide. Endodermal cells are produced from exterior embryonic cells, and a third layer of the mesoderm is involved through the operations already alluded. Indeed, torsions folding through the previous operations embody the three-layered ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm tissue formation of the blastopore invagination of the ovum, that is the gastrulation. Gastrulation as the singularly most important early event that triggers embryological development towards maturity can be naturally seen as the turning outside inside and inside out of the ovum. Thus it operates as in a sphere's inversion, i.e. that is turning inside out and the very reverse. Transforming the sphere to a final topology, that of a two torus with a single hole, which is the shape of organisms that have an intestinal conduct joining mouth and anus. This is the non-dual logophysics manifesting a Klein bottle self-penetration, which is kept embedded in the resultant torus as a 2-to-1 harmonics to be extensively discussed below with relation to perception and the architecture of dynamical genome. In fact, morphomechanics acknowledges an integration of exterior and interior along development through timing, with periods of organism being indifferent to the exterior perturbations and highly sensitive to them in another period. Yet there is still another relation which sets up the primality of torsion with respect to curvature, namely while metric geometries, as chosen by Einstein for the basis of a theory of gravitation, are merely quantitative, torsion geometries embody a distinct quantitative and qualitative nature. There is still more to this primality. Indeed, on a still more basic conceptual level, the space or space-time of metric geometries is perfectly homogeneous, isotropic, and continuous. Hence, it is an abstraction detached from the physical world of materials. They are inhomogeneous. This stands at the basis of the stalemate for achieving a reconciliation of Einstein's general relativity with quantum mechanics, the latter requiring discontinuities due to the discrete nature of the quanta and their jumps, both related to torsion geometry. Thus, in its impossibility of treating the discrete nature of quantum and the discontinuities brought up with it, metric geometries of a continuum fail to account for quantum phenomena, while torsion geometries indeed encompasses them in its very foundations. And here's an interesting quote from Rovelli, 2008. Claimed at the putative spacetime that the putative spacetime to embody such a reconciliation is dynamic and can fold and stretch like a rubber sheet, in other terms which are proper to phenomenology after the philosopher Merleau-Ponty, a space-time that can be fleshed, as in the case of the geometry of development of actual organisms, as in morphomechanics conceived in terms of torsion geometries. Indeed, torsion geometries stand for heterogeneity, dislocation, and singularities, which certainly are attributes of physical systems, but most conspicuously is also the case of biological systems, as already discussed in relation to morphomechanics of development. Liquid crystals do indeed stretch and fold as Möbius strips. They are crucial to the integration of body functioning through collagen molecules which forms the major part of tissues like bone, cornea, or tendon, where they organize into ordered fibrillar networks. Furthermore, liquid crystals, through their non-orientable topologies in principle, they can self-penetrate, such as in the Klein bottle, which is the case of genomics to be elaborated in the sequel. Other experimentally realizable configurations of light are such that the electric and magnetic field components form closed loops with knotted and intricate linkages, which are pervasive to DNA and molecules in the setting of the topological theory of electromagnetism and chemistry, respectively. So I stop here by flesh. You can put in page 12. Let's see here. Lucio Diego Rapoport is eloquently and clearly pointing to a deeper understanding of quantum mechanics, especially Carlo Rovelli and Christopher Evans, where to show that we need to go deeper into what is an observer. And to say an observer could actually evoke ideas of dualism once more, because an observer is by principle a term that means standing apart. And this was one of the things that so clearly expounded by Rapoport, that matrix is in itself something that very much points to dualism. Because you measure from one point to another, you directly establish the conception of a separation. Chris Evans clearly expounded that the idea of separation itself is what causes this spooky action at a distance, a more or less unsolvable problem until you start to understand that matrix is the thing that sort of evokes dualism. Matrix by itself has the character of, let's say, Newtonian absolute distance, exterior being absolutely cut off from interior, and so on and so on. So in the very words we are using, there are pointers to dualism. Rapoport is very careful, and this is also the reason for his dual criticism of the toroid idea of F.K. Meyer and Hans Gesink. In the back door, unbeknownst to themselves, they dragged in dualism once more. And it's oddly interesting. I stumble upon, maybe it's more appropriate to say, both Chris Evans and Rapoport at the same day. And Christopher Evans is very clear in trying to show that the very idea of distance is problematic. Space is local as it is. Space is here. Distance in itself is problematic. And one can also turn the table, as we know now, by chirality. Chirality is sidedness. This is much more important than the idea that you orient yourself to an outside model or form, and that I should be 3 meters from that table because of an outside coordinate system. That is Newtonian, and it reinforces dualism quite vehemently. Space is non-local. I can only orient it from my own thinking. And here it's important to note that the idea of thinking being shut off or cut off from body, the embodiment, will make chirality, sidedness, inaccessible. And this was the reason to Rapoport at the end of the lecture, what I was reading in pages 11 and 12, was talking about the very, very important vaginal fold that became the ovum, and that became the gastrointestinal tract, cut the individual, the cell, into 2 parts, and thereby chirality was present. Chirality is the important thing, but because of a stuckedness, we just look at inside, outside, and by making them divided in language, in thinking, because that penetrates all sections, I start to understand more why Rapoport constantly make these lists with physics, biology, psychology, sociology, and mathematics, and so forth, which is very hard to read, makes understanding tough. But now I realize why they are so incredibly important. Without them, and this reinforcing constantly that they are all part of the same toroidal movement, the torsion is what creates them. Go back to Auge Bohr. It is the movement that is more important. Information is reality. If we start with existence, we lose out on reality. Existences, materiality is secondary. It is not unreal, it is as real as it gets, but without understanding the before, the being, we will also lose out on beings. An Heideggerian term, yes, but it goes hand in hand with what Rapoport is disclosing. Chirality, I will go back to, but it's incredibly interesting. Without chirality, there wouldn't be a universe. This is clear. And chirality is not dependent on the outside world. It is like the momentum. It is self-supportive, not dependent. It's an originating force. And it's crucial for all movement, direction, and thinking. Remember, thinking and embodiment in this chirality and inside-outside dissolvement are one and the same. And this needs to be understood, not repeated. Yes, I am repeating it here, but in order to understand it slowly, little by little, it will come. And in that is a better understanding of reality as it is. without having to, well, we need classical physics until we get this deeper understanding. We have no choice. I mentioned that in the penultimate lecture, that without the development of non-Euclidean mathematics by Riemann and Gauss in the mid-19th century, this could never ever have happened. Knowledge has its own structure. We neglect that. We just call it information or understanding. It is far more complex, deep, and I would say delicate. Those sweeping generalization of knowledge are devastating into the ability to look into them carefully and really understand them. We're making summaries of them as I do here, but I think the summaries are stepping stones. They help us go a little bit further, and I'm really glad finally we're going to Rapoport. It has been 2.5 to 3 years wait. What happenstance, synchronicity played in as well. I had 1 hour, just came out of the blue, and Rapoport turned out on the itinerary because of F.K. Meyer, of course, but that was not the only reason. The striding reason was the torsion that Rapoport wanted to make his understanding clear, shown. I will continue this, but take it in little portions. This is mind-boggling if pushed too hard. It can actually break the understanding. So take it little by little, go easy on yourself. It is not an easy matter. Well, it's almost afternoon here. Still good morning. I wish you a very pleasant day. Do enjoy. Try to show a little panoramic here.